Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 276, presented by Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again we are joined by the esteemed, the knowledgeable, the expert in all things Bruins hockey, Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports. What's up, Ty? How you doing?
What's going on? I'm not an expert. I just try. I say words on the radio, and sometimes they're correct, sometimes they're not.
I'm trying to pump you Ty's here, doing what I can.
I appreciate it.
Ty, you look at the Bruins right now. This is coming off of a 4-3 overtime win over the Calgary Flames, a game where, for the most part, the way it was going, you're like, all right, there's another step in the right direction. You had that setback against Toronto, but seemed like a good team win. Like, they were taking care of the puck. They were controlling play. They were scoring at 5-on-5. All things looking good. And then they almost blow it, give up a surrender a 2-goal lead in the third period, end up winning in overtime. Elias Lindholm sets up Brad Marchand for the game winner with about 20 seconds left on the clock. So Bruins still get 2 points at home against Calgary. What was your kind of main takeaway from that game and how things played out?
Yeah, I think right now, and I know this is perhaps an overly simplistic way to look at things, they got something out of the game, right? And I still think, to your point, like, yeah, you're highlighting the positives, but they're still a little flat at times for prolonged stretches. They still have issues connecting with their passing. I thought it got better during spurts, namely in the second period, it felt like, but they got something out of it, right? And I think that's what's important right now. You look at this team, the way they're playing. You lose, you get shut out in Toronto. That's a bad taste in your mouth. You're up 2 after 2 periods, and then you blow it. And you could kind of tell they were going to blow that lead. I turned to you during the game, and I was like, they're going to tie it. You could just tell, right?
But Kadri toe drag, snap the puck like a minute later.
Disgusting. Just a disgusting goal, but you could feel it coming, right? But I think what's important there is that the Bruins did not give up, a clunker with a minute and a half left in the game. They were close. There was one chance by Calgary. I went, oh, that could have gone in. It didn't happen. They go to OT. They get the win. They get the 2 points. So and I think right now where they are, like, you just don't want things snowballing in the wrong direction, right? And so that's the biggest takeaway that you can have from last night. And again, I know it's simplistic. It's not sexy. It's not going to change the world, but it was a disaster, but they were able to stop the bleeding before it became a full-on disaster, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think it was also important that you look at that game, and there's a few guys that I think have been pretty solid throughout the year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the podcast of guys who have probably been their best players, but I think you look at what this team needs to do to start building some momentum. It's having kind of your key pieces start getting some traction here, start feeling good about their game, start stacking good performances, and I think you look at this one where you have Pavel Zacha shifts back to center, has his first goal since opening night, first 5-on-5 goal, which is wild. But
yeah, that's crazy.
He gets on the board. Charlie Cole gets his first assist of the year, I believe, which is also crazy. He sets up Cole Koepke just by driving towards the net, setting it up on a centering pass there. You look at David Pastrnak. Had a stretch there where it keeps on passing up shots, which is going to drive, I think, everyone crazy, but still had 2 assists. I think his first time this year having 2 5-on-5 points, I believe. Or maybe it's first time since, I think, maybe the Montreal game. But it has not been a regular occurrence of him stacking up points, especially at 5-on-5 play. He sets up Hampus Lindholm. He sets up Pavel Zacha for that goal there. And then you have Elias Lindholm, who, again, Brad Marchand gets the overtime winner, but kind of makes the whole play happen. Sticks with the play, pressures Anderson, turns the puck over, feeds it to Marchand in front, rebound chance, puts it away. I think when you look at that, right, where, again, it's not like these guys had takeover games. We're still waiting, I think, for the 2-goal, 2-assist game from Pastrnak or a 3-point game from Lindholm, 2-goal game from Coyle, something like that. But I think when you look at a game like this where Zacha contributes, Coyle, Marchand gets the OT winner, Lindholm, all these guys, it's what you want to see. And you hope it, again, just leads to more and more kind of cohesion and just that confidence building, because you're going to need these guys to start pulling on the rope a lot more. They want to get out of this kind of 500, sub 500 kind of stretch they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a big part of that is they can't afford, we've talked about it before, right? Like they can't afford regression from so many guys that had career years a year ago. Like you can get a little bit of it, but it can't all be constant all at once, all at the same time. Which is kind of what it was the first, 12 games of the year, basically. They're starting to pull themselves out of it. That's the important thing. But yeah, I mean, like you mentioned Zaka, you mentioned Coyle, you mentioned Lindholm. Like those guys all got to be in your top six. I know it'd be ideal to be able to put one of them on line three and create a mismatch, but they've invested in goal and on the back end. So those three guys got to be in your top six. Now, and this is something we've talked about before as well, stacking the deck down the middle. That's the only way that I'm going to accept that. And that's what they did in Thursday night's game, having each of those three guys, Elias Lindholm, Charlie Coyle, and Pavel Zacha, all center their own line. I think that makes sense. If you're weak on the wings, load up down the middle and try to, just be better down the middle. And so that's something we've talked about before on this podcast, I'm pretty sure. And to see it executed, I think it does make them deeper, but you got to have those guys you mentioned putting the puck in the net, playing with confidence, playing with poise. And I think you definitely saw it on Thursday night. So now you got to hope it keeps rolling here because that has been the greatest challenge for this team. They've had a lot of wins where we talked about it, but the Toronto win, I mean, that should have been a building block. You overcome two separate deficits, you win that game in OT, and then you flounder from there. I feel the same way about I don't know how you feel about this. I didn't want to give them too much credit for the weekend sweep against Philly and Seattle because I thought, okay, well, you should have never lost to Philly in the first place. So
Yes.
you broke even there, in my opinion. But secondly, that Saturday game in Philly was a 1:00 game. The Bruins went right home after the game. They were probably home around what? Let's say 6:30,
Yeah.
7. The Seattle Kraken didn't drop the puck against the Ottawa Senators until 7:15 p.m. in Ottawa. So they're playing a game on they're playing 2 games in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And they looked it. They totally looked it as well. And so I think that I didn't want to give them too much credit for that reason. They were good wins. It was great to win those games, don't get me wrong. But I was kind of like, I'm looking at Tuesday in Toronto. So to get that win on Thursday, I think was huge. To get you feeling a little bit more comfortable with this team right now.
Yeah, and I think you look at that game as well, looking at someone like Jonas Corposalo, a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the scouting report on him is firing pucks from the blue line, firing pucks from the point, because it does seem like that is where he tends to let in some of those ones where you're like, that's not great. But kind of stuck with it. Again, like wouldn't say it was a great performance for him, but gutted things out, had some key saves in overtime, which is very funny. Most of that, the first 60 minutes of that game, honestly, was pretty boring. And then, like, the overtime actually was probably the best part.
I would agree. Yeah.
Bruins, beyond the fact the Bruins won. But what do you make of Corposalo right now in terms of what he's given you? Because I think going into the year, right, expectations probably weren't all that high for a guy coming off the year he had, but he's at least doing enough that's like keeping you in some of his games, which if he's your backup and you're just trying to find some, again, building blocks, momentum, whatever the word may be, I think he's done it so far. I really don't have too many qualms with him beyond like the occasional, feels like every game there's that one goal where you're like, we'll kind of want that back. But if that's your backup and you're trying just to find some cohesion there, I think he's done a pretty solid job so far.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it. That was sort of what I thought about him watching him in Ottawa last year was that shots early in the game and shots from distance would beat him, but in tight, I thought he was pretty good. And it felt like that's kind of been a carryover here where that Tyson Berry shot, yeah, he's got to have it. And he admits it after the game. And, hey, that was just a bad read on my part. I got to stop that shot. Like, it's interesting, I think, how you look at his game and kind of where he's at. His high danger save percentage is actually really good right now. He gets beat. I think last night, I want to say he was 6 for 6 on high danger shots. This is according to Natural Stat Trick. Internally they might have their own metrics that say something else, but he's 6 for 6 on that. On the year, it's an 860. Like that's not bad. That's kind of what around Ullmark and Swing were giving you a year ago, I want to say. In terms of that high danger, I think it was, I want to say it was around that kind of threshold. But
yeah,
if you look at him right now, I just did it real quick here. among goalies with 5 games played, Jonas Korpisalo's high danger save percentage, all situations, is the fifth best in hockey right now. Like, so if you can limit the low danger, I mean, that's such a weird thing to say. It's almost like Bobrovsky.
Give up all of the high danger.
Yeah, just let him between the circles.
Just have them be like, the strategy is become the Carolina Hurricanes PK. Just like pressure puck carriers. Who gives a shit what's down at the crease? Because he'll bail you out. It's a very unorthodox defensive structure there.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. That's kind of what he's been like, though. And it reminds me of Bobrovsky in that Bruins series last year, where like the Bruins weren't beating him from in tight, but Brandon Carlo was beating him from, right inside the blue line on like a borderline, saucer pass. You're like, sure, why not? Like that's kind of what it feels like with Korpisalo right now. And but I love the recovery. To your point, I love the recovery of he gives up the game-tying goal 19 seconds after the Bruins score a goal. It's on their second shot of the game, and he finishes with what I want to say 34 saves on 37 shots, something thereabouts. Yeah. So, like, the recovery is great, right? He didn't crumble. He didn't melt down. I don't fault him on the goals, the second and the third goal. They're going to get theirs, and especially when you take bad penalties, right? And so I've actually been pleasantly surprised with his game. And this is where I think things get interesting, is that not to say that Swayman has been playing poorly, because I don't think he has, but this is sort of the split that I think you'd want to see. If you're going to pay a backup goaltender $3 million and you have a massive hole in your middle six, like that $3 million goalie has to play 30, 35 games, I think. And so the pacing out of the gate was a little whack, whereas Swayman got a lot of run out of the gate. And I was like, okay, I don't think I love the economics of this right now. But I think what you've seen last week is more in line with what they should be doing to keep both guys fresh, but to also sort of, I don't know, justify the investment that they've made from a dollar standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think Korpisalo has been a guy that he hasn't been maybe your best player, obviously, but I think he's a guy that's been a pleasant surprise. And we'll, I think, dive into that now, Ty, looking at guys who have been arguably their best players out of the gate. But before we do that, let's take a quick break here from our good friends over at Prize Picks. The leaves have fallen and the temperature is dropping, but you know what that means. Hockey season is finally here. And there's so many ways for you to get in on the action and win up to 100 times your cash with as little as 4 correct picks on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level on the ice, gridiron, court, and much more. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks invented the Flex Play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks, especially during hockey season. This week, I'm picking David Pastrnak for more than 0.5 goals and Nikita Kucherov for more than 1 assist. It's really that easy. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prize Picks. Ty, we are now, 15 games into the year, which is actually kind of crazy that it feels like it's... I feel like most Bruins seasons start with, you have one game and then it feels like you play 4 over the next 27 days. It does feel like it's actually been a little bit of a better start this year, a little bit more. Of course, the Bruins are not playing that well, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing in terms of they just haven't had time to get in order. But when you look at the way the team is right now, and there's been a lot of guys obviously that have underperformed out of the gate, who are some guys that you think actually have been playing at a high level, or who is the one player that you think has been their best, most consistent player so far this season?
Yeah, no recency bias here. I know he scored a goal last night, but Hampus Lindholm. For me, it's been Hampus Lindholm. I think that, in the offseason, the Bruins talked about having more offense from their back end, having more of a shot first mentality from back there. You bring in Nikita Zadorov to free up guys like Hampus Lindholm and Mason Lohrei, and I think that Hampus Lindholm has completely embraced that idea. I think that he's looked much closer to the guy that you saw in 22-23, who was getting Norris votes by the end of the year. Best season of his career, obviously, that year. I think you're seeing him get back to that level. Now, he's not totally there. They still rely on him in the D zone for, some big minutes and big situations. But ultimately, like, I got to go Hampus Lindholm. I just think that he's been value add most nights. And I think that, he opened up about it last night a little bit, saying that, yeah, it's better to be in more offensive situations. A year ago, he was just ridiculously high usage
Defensive
in the
anchor.
D
Yeah.
zone. It was unbelievable. And people like me, you get why they have to do it because of the roster construct. Forbert was injured. Grzelcyk, is what he is. And Wotherspoon didn't really emerge until the second half. So you understood why they had to do it. But, people like me were sitting there all year going, this is not the way to use him. Like, this is not how you're going to get the best version of Hampus Lindholm. So I just feel like he's been back to just kind of, being more diverse in terms of his deployment. And I think he's really adhered to the coaching and the messaging he's getting about creating more offense. So I got to go with him. What would you say?
I mean, I would echo what you said in terms of I think he's probably been their most impactful player, and he's been one of the few guys that seems to be taking the initiative of being jumping up into the play, being assertive. And again, like I think you look at his skill set, 6'5", defenseman can break out the puck. You can see why they view him as a guy that you put with Carlo, and like you can rely on him to be a defense first guy. But as you said, maybe he can do that, but you're not maximizing the value of the player, right? Right. It's like having a baseball player. It's like, all right, we just want you to aim for contact. Like rather you hit 300 with 20 home runs instead of like, oh, but we know you have 40 home run power. Like I think when you're able to tap more into Lindholm being more of a offensive defenseman, and just again, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going from 30% ozone deployment to 70. You're not turning him in from like a Chara into like a Chris Letang, right? But if you can carve out more of those opportunities for him to be in the offensive zone, especially on the power play, which I think you still need more of that from because the power play just looks so much more cohesive and smoother when he's out there. But even at 5-on-5 play, yeah, like you're seeing a guy that seems confident. We know what he's done in the past. As you said 2 years ago when he was a legit Norris candidate there. And that's not to say that all of a sudden he's going to break out for 50 points this year, but I think you look at what the Bruins want to do, especially getting the defense involved on offense. I think he's been, without a doubt, their most consistent player. Like they've got a lot of talent all across that decor, but in terms of consistency, and I think sticking to the game plan of what they want from their blue liners, I think Lindholm's been the guy that's been the most consistent in that regard.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is that, like, overall, they have to continue to generate more offense from, but like what you can do when Lindholm was playing this way is that what we've talked about from the jump with this team is that you can get away with putting Lohrei, with McAvoy. You could get away with putting Zadorov on your third pairing, or vice versa. Like it just makes you a much more complete left side. Whereas I feel like the right side, there's less room for maneuvering. Like we know Charlie McAvoy is going to be RD1. We know Brandon Carlo's RD2, and then it's like, okay, like so where's everyone else slot in there? Like Wotherspoon right now has been playing the offside at the right side third pairing, but like I think that left side just has so much room for versatility and options and maneuvering based on the opponent's matchup. And if Lindholm is playing the way that is playing this year versus last year, or playing like he did in 22-23, like you just have so many more options, right? And I think that's kind of like, you can sometimes fall into paralysis by analysis when it comes to like how to deploy a team. And I think Jim Montgomery has at times, but like the strength of this team is basically like okay, the face-off is on the left side in the attacking zone. Okay, we got 3 guys that excel at this spot right here. Oh, it's on the right side of the defensive zone. We got 2 guys that we know can handle this. Like, that's where their strength really is, right? And when Lindholm is going the way he's going, that allows you to have that strength at full capacity here.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think hopefully he continues to kind of build on that and as being kind of that guy that just frees up so many options as to how they want to augment that decor. I also would say another guy is, I mean, you can take your pick, any one of those guys on the fourth line. I'll go with Kastelik as a guy that I think has been probably the most consistent. I think Koepke is probably, that's been a shock in terms of where he was going into camp to what he is now, looking like a legitimate, like not just fourth line guy, but like maybe bottom 6, just guy you can put in to give you a little bit of energy there. But I think you look at Kastelik, has been as advertised in faceoffs, but the whole thing with him was that, he's a guy that has a motor, can do a little bit of everything, but, Ottawa fans are saying like, he's not like this bruising guy or a guy that's, going to be like a prototypical Bruins fourth line player. Dude hits like a freight train. Like he's been very physical. He's leading the team. He's already got 64 hits in 15 games, and all of them you kind of notice. It's not just, knocking guys off the glass. He's running through players when he's doling out these hits. So he's been, I think, surprising there in terms of how physical he's been, and then the production offensively. Again, I don't know if you're expecting him to be a 30-point player or whatever you kind of tab his ceiling is in terms of production. He's already 4 points away from his career high, but I think he's a guy that even if the scoring does dip or regress from where it's been so far to start the year, if he plays like that and he's hounding pucks and he's knocking guys around, I would say that fourth line, but wherever you put him in the lineup, you're going to have an impactful guy if he's playing to that level.
Yeah, 100%. And 7 even strength points right now. He's tied for 60th most among guys, 5-on-5 points rather, with 7 of them. Like, this has been found money in a lot of regards, and we're gonna see it tomorrow. We're gonna get a look, which we'll talk about. Linus Ullmark, but like getting him as a proverbial throw-in is looking like a great move for the Bruins, and I think there's a lot of things you can say about this team and their management, things they don't do well, things they could do better. I think one thing they do exceedingly well, and Cole Koepke falls under that as well, is like they know how to identify bottom 6 talent. Like they're really freaking good at that. From Kastelik to Riley Nash to Tim Schaller to Noel Achari. Like they know
Wagner, and we keep on going. I feel like we could do like the thing where it's just bros going back and forth, like naming NFL receivers. Just name beloved Bruins fourth liners and keep on going. But
it's crazy. It's unbelievable the only guy who wasn't like that is Dom Moore. Kind of a weird guy looking back on it. Kind of weird. Little. Remember he was on ESPN and he was like, "Yeah, Chara. It kind of made me uncomfortable how much he liked working," and I was like, "What?"
the calamity,
right? He was just like, "Yeah, rub some guys the wrong way." I'm like, "I rubbed you the wrong way."
I was going to say, yeah. It seems very odd to have that be the sticking point in terms of a guy fitting in the lineup. But as you said, every single guy, or pretty much all these guys they brought in, even if you don't really have the book out on them, like, they seem like they fit in very, very well, or they have a ceiling that the Bruins can see, and it's easy to map it out. Even like this year hasn't gone well for like Max Jones, but then you offset that with Kastelik and Koepke and all these other players. It's a pretty consistent trend that they've had in terms of finding these fourth line guys.
Yeah, and I think Kastelik is a great pick. I do. I would say that if you picked Lindholm, that's where I was going. I was going to go there. What I like about him too is you mentioned the physicality. You mentioned, how he's been able to channel that and be consistent with it. What I think is kind of underrated about him is the reach too. Like he's a big guy, and I think defensively, like that's where your length is valued. And we talk about how big they are, how heavy they are. I think at a fourth line role, it's about closing, and it's about giving the other team nothing to work with offensively, or getting back to deny an entry and keep them, hemmed in the neutral zone and on their heels. Like, I think that's where he's been pretty good as well. So, that might be more eye test than anything you can sort of quantify, but I just think that's one thing with his, his package that I think has kind of, been overlooked at times because of the scoring, which is not a bad thing about a fourth liner, but I like watching that line get going, they get that cycle going, because man, they're a pain. When they
Yeah.
get going, they are hard to stop.
Yeah, without a doubt. In terms of a player that has been most disappointing, and there's been a lot of guys that have struggled. So we talk about naming fourth liners. We go back and forth in terms of guys who need to kind of pick it up. But briefly, is there any player that stands out to you that you're like, I really need to see more from this player right now from what they've shown so far?
Yeah, I got to go with Trent Frederick. 15 games. He's got 1 goal. He's got 3 points. I believe he's a minus. Like, I want to say minus. I think he's the worst plus minus on the team. I want to say it's minus 10.
8. No, it's minus 10. Yeah, that actually. Yeah.
So that's just not. It's not good enough, right? And I think what's interesting here is that, okay, so you're going to say Trent Frederick. Like Trent Frederick's spot in the lineup hasn't been, he hasn't been sat down. Yeah. He got 1 more point than Morgan Geekie does. And Morgan Geekie's kind of, been in and out of the lineup. Montgomery says he's got to play better. He's like kind of put him on notice, but Trent Frederick hasn't been that much better, I would say. And so I got to say that it's a contract year. He's a very valuable player. He's a guy that we looked at and said, every line is better with him on it. Mm-hmm. And that just hasn't really followed this year, it felt like. So I got to go with him because I just think that I expected more. And it can come. It's 15 games. It's not the end of the season. But a player that I thought would make a more all-around impact, even if he wasn't scoring goals, which he's not doing that either.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great pick. And again, there's a lot of forwards you can point to that need to pick it up, even like Pasternak getting more from Geekie, Zacha, Coyle, run down the list. One guy that I would say, and it's something that I think there were concerns going into this season about what you're going to get from the player, what I think probably evident flaws he has, but I think a guy like Zadorov needs to reel it in a little bit. We know the penalty issues was a thing, but it's been bad. Especially when this team is struggling, especially in terms of special teams, and it feels like they're starting to get a little bit better in terms of 5-on-5. Maybe not scoring in bunches, but the game is steadier. They're when they're at 5-on-5 play, and Zadorov keeps on taking penalties. And again, he's a physical player, but I notice Kastelik running through guys a lot more than a guy like Zadorov right now. And doesn't help that Montgomery was like, yeah, his grasp of systems isn't that great. I'm like, I don't want to hear that. That's
right.
Like a really good thing to hear. These guys can't grasp system play. And again, I do feel like the trend with Zadorov when he's been with different teams is that it takes him some time to kind of settle in. I was reading through a few like Flames boards that said like early on he was pretty rough and then he kind of settled in. Same thing with Vancouver where, I don't think the Bruins are hoping that he takes off only in the playoffs, but I think he needs some time to get settled in and figure out what his role is. But I think that's a guy that you need more from in terms of, I think, the bread and butter of his game, the physicality, the dynamic ability that he has, but got to cut down on the penalties because right now, the way the Bruins PK is struggling, you're putting yourself in too many holes here. When you keep it a 5-on-5 play, I like how they're playing. Look at the Toronto game. Like, it was kind of boring, but you were steady at 5-on-5 against Toronto. That game was so bad.
I wanted the nice excuse to not have to pay attention to election coverage, and that game was like, hey, here's crap. And I'm like, I don't want that.
Yes, exactly. It's like, all right, I got to pivot to Steve Kornacki and John King instead for more riveting things going on. But yeah, I think Zadorov is someone that needs to work overall in terms of what he's providing this team, because you need him to be that impactful present. He has been impactful, but not in a good way.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to come. I feel like there's an element here where maybe, he's been kind of pigeonholed, right? Like every time we've talked to him, someone has asked him, it's a good fit. Fighting? It's a good fit. You like hitting, you like violence, right? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And I think sometimes like he wants to impress the fans. It's the first year of the biggest contract of his life. It's a new city, it's a new system, it's a new structure. And he wants to, do what they think is what's going to endear him to the fans. I think that's a legit thing. But I think at the same time, going end to end and scoring some beauties like he did in Vancouver, like that will also endear you to the fans. I just worry that like he's almost thinking like, I gotta be a face eater, like, because that's what they want. And that's how they're going to like me because, my contract is big. Like, nah, man, like if he's just Vancouver, Nikita, like Bruins fans will be happy and they'll deal with the penalties. It's just, you got to get that all around package kind of together here. And I think he will. I can tell you this is that Jim Montgomery, one of his first coaches was Daryl Sutter. So I assume that there was some conversations there, and I don't know if I'm messing this up. I think Zadorov did play for Sutter at one point. I want to say.
I think so.
But I'm sure that he reached out and asked, what it was like having him. Yes, Daryl Sutter did coach while Nikita was there. So, but I'm sure there's been conversation there. So like they're still kind of figuring out how to deploy him, how to use him. But I do agree that like he's got to stay out of the box. It's just. You can live with the penalties, but it's like an unsustainable clip right now in terms of penalties.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, yeah, guys like that do need to step it up. We'll see if they're able to build some traction. Going to Saturday's game against Linus Ullmark and the Ottawa Senators. We'll talk a little bit more about Ullmark and recapping that trade from June. But before we do that, Ty, let's take another quick break here from our good friends over at Game Time Tickets.
There's nothing like watching an NBA or NHL game live. The energy in the building, the sounds on the ice or the court, the memories you make with family, friends, and other fans. It's unmatched. And the coolest part is when strangers sitting around you become your best friends. You can make these memories with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. When I use Game Time, I also love the flash deals, which help me get discounted prices on really good seats. Plus, who doesn't love seat views, which give a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy? So, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, back to the show.
Shout out once again to our good friends over at Game Time Tickets. Ty, now looking ahead to Saturday's game, the hug heard around the world. Maybe we'll see with Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. And obviously we'll see how that game plays out. Both Swayman and Ullmark probably haven't gotten off to the starts that they wanted in their new elevated roles. Swayman's been up and down. Ullmark was banged up a little bit in October. He's come back and he's lost 4 out of his last 5 games. I think he has an .873 save percentage since coming back. So he's kind of trying to find out where he is on the depth chart. Forsberg's now like eating into his minutes and his starts as well, which is not what you want to see if you're Ottawa when you've just gave Ullmark a long-term extension as well. But looking at just the overall Ullmark, trade and what they got from him, how do you feel the Bruins right now have made out in terms of where the pieces kind of fall following that move?
Yeah, I mean, I think they clearly bought a first-round pick to a degree by taking on Korpisalo. We talked about he's been better, but still $3 million tied up in that kind of gamble. I think there's an element there of buying a first-round pick. And again, I like Korpisalo. It's just I $3 million per year for 4 years for a guy who throughout that tenure is going to be your backup. That's a heavy investment right there. And I don't know if it's one that you can afford when you're paying Pastrnak what you're paying him, you're paying McAvoy what you're paying him, and you're paying Swayman what you're paying him. Like those kind of gambles on like Hudobin and Halak, it made way more sense when you had Bergeron and Marchand and Pastrnak all making well under market value. It's a little bit harder when those kind of contracts go out the window. But ultimately, it was a trade that we all knew was coming. I didn't think there was any chance that they would run it back with both guys. It just felt like they have too many needs. Both guys wanted to play 50-plus games. The NHL season's only 82 games long, so that can't happen.
Yep.
And so it just made sense, right? And so, in theory, I don't hate the return because you had to make that trade, right? It's better than what You look at what Vegas does when they dump guys, like they get nothing basically, like the
Right.
beats alternative there. But I haven't hated the trade because I think we all knew it was coming, right? Like, did you think there was any chance they were going to run it back with both guys?
No, and I think especially when you look at, once again, we always would talk about, and again, both Ullmark and Swayman, like if they were still here this year, they probably aren't 7-1, right? Like
Right.
the math works, the production, how great they are as a tandem. Your ceiling in terms of your goaltending is still the highest when they're both out there. It just wasn't feasible anymore when you look at the contracts, and especially how the last 2 years played out. Like we talked about it all of last year after how disastrous the playoffs were in 2023, right? Of like, all right, maybe is this going to be the year where Montgomery goes 1-2 back and forth between Swayman and Ullmark, and how difficult it is to really commit to that when the pressure is that high and the margins forever are so slim in the postseason. Sure enough, Swayman takes the job. And again, full credit to him. He played like a guy that was your number one. But I think that just once again validates like these two guys are so good together. But you can't keep two number one guys that play at this level, even if they are best pals and how close they are, on and off the ice. In terms of just the production, the minutes, and how much you can afford to give to each one of these really great players, something had to give. So I was not surprised at all. And for the Bruins, it's all about making the most of it. I know when the trade went down, which we forget, they made that trade right before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
Just want to enjoy the game. Why is that so hard?
I didn't watch 1 minute of that goddamn game because I was breaking down and trying to figure out who Mark Kastelik was.
Yeah.
But again, when you look at the time, people were not very happy about their return. People thought they were going to get like Shane Pinto back. And I was like, that was never going to happen. Or something like that to that effect. But I think when you look at just how tough it is to gauge the goalie market in terms of returns and trades, you got to get something back. And they, so far at least, have made the most of it. The true determinant will be Letourneau at BC, which again, that is going to be a couple of years from now. And that is probably the true determinant as to whether the Bruins really made the most of this trade. But it wasn't like this was one that it wasn't, not going to happen. People also look at like the Ullmark trade and the timing out of like, why'd you trade him before you signed Swayman and all that stuff? They had to trade him before July 1st. Like there was, when you look at like the trade protections, those kinds of things, like the Bruins were on a little bit of a time crunch here. So you had to move a guy where it's tough to gauge the value of his position, even with his very strong resume. And you get back a guy that looks like a steal as a fourth line player, a solid backup, and a really, really intriguing first round talent that you hope ends up being a top six guy 5-6 years down the road. At this point, I think you take it.
Oh yeah, I mean he's definitely a boom or bust kind of candidate.
Yeah.
And real quick, going back to Ullmark, you knew it was over because do you remember when we talked to him? This was during the Toronto series when it was kind of clear that like Swayman had taken the job. Mm-hmm. And Ullmark said, well, I'm not here to be a little crybaby. And we were kind of asking him like more about that. Like, okay, well, like what's like the mental side of it? And he outright said, he goes, some days are better than others. Some days are harder than others. And you're like, oh yeah, no, he wants to play in the playoffs. And I get it. It's just not going to happen if that guy's here or vice versa. And so somebody was going to have hurt feelings. So to get something while you could, and to get a prospect like Letourneau, like I am hopeful that he will be a good player. I think that people have to have a lot of patience with him.
Yes.
Because of the fact that he should be playing in the USHL right now and not college. He got an offer to play in college after Will Smith went pro. So it was like, okay, well, now the timeline has been accelerated for him. That doesn't necessarily mean that his own timeline has been accelerated towards being NHL ready. And so I think we're going to look back, most likely, we're going to look back on his first year at BC and go, well, that wasn't anything special, but it's like, okay, well, he shouldn't be there in the first place. Like that's kind of, so I think people got to be really patient with this guy, which I will say that to you, that the Blues were not patient with Tage Thompson, as we all know. And that's, then he ends up in Buffalo and now he's one of the best goal scorers in hockey. So this is a really interesting test, I think, for the Bruins in terms of like, how patient are you organizationally? Has your philosophy changed in terms of prospects are prospects. They're not trade capital. They are. We want to develop them. We want to grow. They got to grow. But he's going to be a gigantic case study in that regard in terms of how they're operating. Their operation has changed in terms of being more patient with guys, making sure that they're not skipping steps, that they are following, that they are getting the best version of that player.
Yeah, without a doubt. Again, it is a challenge for Bruins fans to show patience in any regard, but you have to do it with a guy like Dean Letourneau.
Yeah, no, I hate being patient. I want it now. The sun could explode. I want it now. I'm sorry. Like, I completely admit that I am one of these people. It's why I've been so pissed off. Like, I just want to know. I want to know if Lysell and Merkulov can play here. If they can't, all right, then let's move on. But I want to know. I don't know. And so I myself have to be patient. I've learned over time. It's not going to happen. I can hope for it, but it ain't going to happen.
Letourneau's going to have like a between the legs, like dangle goal against BC in a couple of months, and people are going to be like, call him up. It's like, no,
Yeah.
please don't do that. You can't. But
Yeah, right.
anyway, so I digress. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Real quick, do you think there's a hug tomorrow after the game?
I'm
going to say no.
I'm going to say no, because I feel like it's going to end up being like I'm going to say it's going to be a lopsided result, regardless of, I'm not sure who's going to win it, but someone's going to give up like 5 goals.
Right. It's going to be like, I don't want to hug anybody right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a 1-0, like hard fought end of the game. You give the hug at center. Maybe they have like a fight. What if they like, what if
sick?
Like Brady Tkachuk like start something, and then like they fight and they just punch each other, then they give a hug at the end.
I thought Swayman was going to fight us today.
That's true. Yes, exactly. So maybe he's setting the tone in terms of what to expect moving forward. So
he walked in, gave you the shove, gave me the shove, and I was like, "Hey, fella."
Yeah, exactly.
Joel Embiid got in a lot of trouble for that.
Exactly. People are saying, right? But I would say no. There'll be a lot of nice words after the game, stuff like that. Ullmark is going to drop some great quotes as he usually does during scrums. He had another great one today. I don't know if you heard him in Ottawa. Someone in Ottawa asked him like where his game was at, and he was like, "I do not know." I was like, all right, like he has not changed very much in terms of where he was, but he also was like, you know what, sun's gonna come up tomorrow, and I'm excited to play a hockey game. Like,
yeah,
Linus has not changed from what we've seen in Boston over the years.
The money hasn't changed him. That's so good to know.
And an extremely positive person, which at times did not mesh with the negativity in this market, but never let that kind of steer away kind of his approach, which is pretty admirable in a guy playing a position like that. So
I think you have to be that guy. I that's just my own philosophy. Like even Tim Thomas was like he was a nut, but when you would talk to him like leading up to things, he wasn't like that all that often. Like on the ice, you can be competitive and you can be fiery, but I think off the ice, having that kind of demeanor, I think it helps. I think it helps your team in terms of like getting things done. Like I don't know if you can be Jordan Binnington wanting to fight everybody every day before your teammates are like, "Oh my God, dude, enough. We get it." Yeah, exactly. So, but anyways, you can find all my stuff at 985thesportshub.com. You can also hear me on the hockey show every Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on 985 The Sports Hub. You can always call in too. I'd love to hear from you, from the people out there. Do it. Call in. So that's where you can find me. How about you?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at boston.com on the Boston Globe. We've covered every step of the way with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff. So please read all of my stuff over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it's called, you can at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you once again for hopping on the show. This is episode 276 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.